Hey friends, welcome to Midweek. I am so glad that you're joining with us tonight, specifically tonight, because we are starting a brand new series called Image. And what we're doing in this series, Image, is going all the way back to the very beginning of the Bible, where God says, let us make man in our image. And we are going to dissect exactly what that looks like, because I know for me, and I'm sure for you, you've probably sat back one day and asked this question: what in the world am I here for? What is my purpose? Why did God create me? What's the origin of humanity? And we are going to look at this, and we are going to just hit every possible angle. We're not leaving any stone unturned as we navigate through this idea of what the Latin philosophers call the imago Dei, the image of God. But in order to get there, we have to understand Genesis chapter 1. And so if you have your Bible, open it up to the very first book, to the very first verse of the very first chapter. And let's just see how God tells us to interpret the rest of this chapter. Here's what he says. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So we see two big problems here that God is telling us we should look at the rest of this chapter to be able to interpret what this looks like. So God addresses two very specific issues. The first one is that the earth is created without distinction, without form, right? And it's empty. There's nothing there. There's nothing in it. All we see is the Spirit of God hovering over the waters, which is a big theological thing anyway that we'll unpack way later probably. But what I want you to see here is the problem that God is about to address, because it's that lens that we should look at the rest of the creation story. The two things. The one is formlessness. So in days 1, 2, and 3, you see God addressing that specific problem, formlessness. So he brings things like light and darkness. That covers that, right? He's just making specific distinctions. We see sky and water. We see land, sea, and vegetation. These are the things where God takes this formless world and he starts to create distinctions in it. He starts to put boundaries, limitations, and he starts to identify further exactly the world that you and I get to experience in the physical realm every single day. God addresses that problem. And then in days 4, 5, and 6, God is addressing the problem of emptiness. Right? He's already addressed formlessness. Now he's addressing emptiness. And what's interesting about this, the best way that you can memorize the creation story is to know that the very alternate day. So day 1, the first day of creation, God created this. Day 4 is going to be God filling day 1. Day 5 is God filling day 2. Day 6 is God filling day 3. And when you get that right, when you understand, okay, at the beginning, God created light and darkness, right? He'd made that distinction. So then on day 4, God put the moon, the stars, and the sun all in that. He was filling the formlessness. Isn't that cool? How you could see God right there tell you this is exactly how you should read this. And that's exactly how it is. Day 1, light, darkness, separation, distinction. Day 4, star, moon, sun. So if that means day 2 is sky and water, what do you think God is doing there? Well, he's filling that with everything that flies in the air and all the fish that swim in the sea. And then day 3, likewise, with the land, the sea, and the vegetation. Day 6, God is filling that form with the beasts, with all of other livestock, with all the other animals, and with human beings. Isn't that cool? I mean, just to see that they kind of go together like that is just mind-blowing, especially when you see the problem being addressed in the Bible itself. That's how you should always interpret. You don't need a philosopher. You don't need a doctorate degree. You don't need anybody telling you how to look at the Bible. God gives you the clue to the playbook right there. And I wanted to share that bit with you as we get started on this series, because it's vitally important. Because when you go to verse 26, which is going to be the heart of our series, here's what it says. It says, then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all other earth, or all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God is saying, okay, now that we've addressed these issues, the last thing we're going to create is humanity. And here's the kicker. All of creation flourishes when humanity is in the picture. And that's why God says at the end of all of this that everything he made with humanity is very, very good. Because creation thrives on the dominion of humanity. And humanity thrives over the work and responsibility that we have over creation, which is precisely why God gives dominion to Adam and Eve. God has given us the authority over all of creation. And it's awesome to see what God is doing with mankind here. But let's continue, verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on earth. Every living thing, right? Look at that. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, every tree with seed in its fruit, and you shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Did you see that? Once humanity enters the picture, God separates all this, right? He brings it all together. He puts distinction, boundaries around the sky, around the earth, around the sea, and then he starts to fill it with everything. But nothing's really thriving until humanity comes into the picture. And then he tells us, you have dominion as mankind over everything of creation. Let's look at it this way. God has created the world to be your backdrop. Everything in creation is for you, so that you can flourish and so that creation can flourish because of who you are. So if you've ever looked in the mirror, right? In fact, I challenge you to do so, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But if you've ever looked in the mirror and looked down on yourself, wondering what your purpose is, wondering how special or unique you are, you have to remember that you were made in the image of God. No other part of creation has the image of God in it, but you do. So what does that look like? What does that mean? And what we're going to uncover over this series is answering that question. What does it mean to be made in the image of God? Why does that separate us from the rest of mankind? And what we're going to see is that there were three specific relationships that, because of the origin of humanity, we now have in our life. The first one is this: the relationship between us and God. God and human. That relationship is paramount, so it should come first. The second relationship we see here is with each other. Human with human. Male and female. And we're going to look at Genesis 2 where we zoom into the creation of mankind and talk about this a little bit further. And then we also see a third relationship, human and creation. And those are very, very specific relationships that God has put in our life so that everything can flourish. And what we're going to talk about next week, to give you a little preview of where we're going, is how sin has broken each one of those relationships. And we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. And so I hope that you're excited about this series, because I know I am. I know I've sat back and I've asked the question, why am I here? In fact, that whole mirror thing, I want you this week sometime to look in the mirror, look at yourself and ask yourself this question: what makes me me? What do you see when you look at yourself? And what makes you unique? What makes you special? What makes you beyond you when you look in the mirror? And when we do that, we can start getting this reflection of what it looks like to be made in the image of God. And I want you to think about that as we travel in to next week. Friends, have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you next time.